The scent of white calla lilies is, to Anna Sloane's mind, the scent of a polite lie. Patrick had hated calla lilies. He always said they looked like they belonged in a museum, not a home. He was a man of vibrant, messy gardens, of overgrown hydrangeas, unapologetic sunflowers, and soil under the fingernails. Yet here they were, dozens of stark white arrangements suffocating the living room of their Philadelphia brick row house, ordered, arranged, and paid for by her daughter-in-law, Rebecca. The funeral reception was winding down, leaving behind the hollow echo of clinking silverware and the low hum of corporate networking disguised as condolences. Anna sat in the high-backed wing chair near the fireplace, a cup of untouched, lukewarm Earl Grey resting on her lap. She wore a deep navy dress, the one Patrick had complimented on their 35th anniversary, her silver-threaded hair pulled back into an elegant, immaculate roll. At 66, Anna possessed a quiet, regal stillness, the kind forged by decades of being a black woman navigating boardrooms and charity galas where her presence was often questioned before it was respected. Across the room, Rebecca was holding court. Dressed in a razor-sharp charcoal gray St. John suit, she didn't look like a grieving widow who had lost her husband 5 years ago, nor did she look like a woman mourning her father-in-law today. She looked like a CEO closing a merger. Rebecca held a glass of sparkling water, nodding sympathetically to a local politician, her hand expertly guiding the conversation. She moves like she's managing a crisis PR campaign, Anna thought, though her face remained an unreadable mask. Nobody came up to ask Anna if she needed water, or if her back ached, or if the house felt too large now. They called her Ma-Anna when Patrick was alive, a term of endearment that had somehow, over the last few weeks, morphed into a polite dismissal. Oh, Ma-Anna is resting. Ma-Anna is overwhelmed. Rebecca had taken over the narrative of Patrick's death the moment the doctors moved him to hospice. She had handled the obituary, the catering, the guest list, and the music. It was flawless. It was timed to the second, and it was entirely devoid of Patrick's soul. When the last of the caterers packed up their silver chafing dishes and the final black town car pulled away from the curb, the heavy oak front door clicked shut. The silence that fell over the house was absolute, ringing in Anna's ears with a physical weight. Rebecca stood in the foyer, her back to Anna, scrolling through her phone. The caterers will send the final invoice to the firm, Rebecca said, not turning around. Her voice was smooth, efficient, and entirely devoid of warmth. I've scheduled the cleaning crew for tomorrow at 9. They'll sanitize the downstairs and clear out the floral arrangements. They were Patrick's flowers, Anna said softly, her voice steady but carrying the gravel of exhaustion. Or rather, they were the flowers you chose for him. Rebecca finally turned, slipping her phone into her blazer pocket. She offered a tight, practiced smile. He deserved a dignified send-off, Anna. The Foundation's stakeholders were present. It needed to reflect the magnitude of his legacy. His legacy. Anna tasted the bitterness of the words. It wasn't his legacy. It was theirs. 40 years ago, Patrick had been a public school teacher with a dream, and Anna had been working 2 shifts at a community clinic, putting every spare dollar into the grassroots youth program that would eventually become the Sloan Foundation. They had built it from a folding table in the basement of a community center into a multi-million-dollar philanthropic powerhouse. They had fought systemic redlining, skeptical bank managers, and the crushing weight of Philadelphia's political machine, together. We'll be moving ahead with the legal processing on Thursday, Rebecca continued, seamlessly shifting to the schedule. Sterling's office, 10 in the morning. I've already briefed the board on the transition timeline. No mention of Anna's grief. No question about what Anna wanted. Just an appointment. I will be there, Anna said, standing up slowly. She didn't break eye contact. Rebecca's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, just enough for Anna to see the calculation behind her eyes, before she nodded and let herself out into the cold November evening. The invitation came not as a personal call, but as an automated calendar invite from the assistant of Arthur Sterling, the Foundation's lead corporate attorney. Subject: estate administration and executive restructuring. On Thursday morning, the Philadelphia wind was biting, tearing the last brown leaves from the oak trees. Anna arrived at the glass and steel skyscraper downtown precisely 10 minutes early. She wore a tailored wool coat and carried the vintage leather briefcase Patrick had bought her when they secured their first $1 million grant. Stepping off the elevator onto the 42nd floor, the smell of eucalyptus and expensive printer ink hit her. The receptionist, a young woman who looked barely out of college, smiled politely. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Anna Sloan. I am here for the reading of Patrick Sloan's estate." The girl blinked, checking her monitor. "Oh, Mrs. Sloan, of course. They are already in the boardroom. Let me show you back." They are already in the boardroom. Anna's spine stiffened. When the heavy frosted glass doors swung open, the scene inside looked like an executive tribunal. 7 people sat around the massive mahogany table. Arthur Sterling sat at the center, flanked by 2 junior associates. Rebecca sat at the head of the table, a stack of heavily tabbed, leather-bound folders in front of her. She was already mid-conversation with a board member. No one stood when Anna entered. The conversation merely paused, hanging in the chilled, air-conditioned room like a suspended breath. "Anna," Rebecca said, gesturing with a platinum pen toward the single empty chair at the far end of the table. "Please, we were just going over the preliminary tax implications." Anna walked to the chair, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. She sat down, placed her briefcase on the table, and folded her hands. She was the only person in the room without a folder, a pen, or a glass of water. Arthur Sterling cleared his throat, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. He had been Patrick's lawyer for 15 years, a man who had eaten Anna's famous peach cobbler at their dining table. Today, he wouldn't meet her eyes. "As you all know," Sterling began, his voice taking on the monotonous drone of legal armor, "we are here to execute the final wishes of Patrick Marcus Sloan and to formalize the transition of the Sloan Foundation's executive leadership, as mandated by the revised trust documents executed 6 weeks prior to his passing." Anna's brow furrowed slightly. 6 weeks prior? Patrick had been heavily medicated 6 weeks ago, drifting in and out of lucidity as the cancer aggressively overtook his liver. Sterling continued, reading off the allocation of minor assets. A summer cabin in the Poconos left to a niece, specific cash donations to a local historically black college, a collection of vintage jazz vinyls left to the local library. Then the tone of the room shifted. It grew dense. Regarding the primary estate, which encompasses the marital home, the liquid investment portfolios, and the controlling interest in the Sloan Foundation. Sterling paused, flipping a page. Patrick M. Sloan has transferred sole executive conservatorship and primary beneficiary status to an irrevocable corporate trust, overseen by the current managing partner, Rebecca Sloan. Silence dropped like a physical weight onto Anna's shoulders. She stopped breathing. "Furthermore," Sterling droned on, reading faster now, "to ensure the dynamic growth and uninterrupted operations of the Foundation, all previous co-beneficiary privileges and executive veto powers formerly held by Anna Sloan are hereby dissolved. The estate provides a fixed monthly stipend for Mrs. Sloan's living expenses, managed at the discretion of the trust." Anna stared at the grain of the mahogany table. The words dissolved, discretion, and stipend bounced around her skull, entirely detached from reality. They had built a $40 million endowment. She was the co-founder. She was his wife of 40 years. And with a few strokes of a pen, she had been reduced to a dependent, living on an allowance handed out by her daughter-in-law. "There must be a mistake," Anna said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a diamond on glass. Sterling finally looked up, his expression a practiced mask of professional sympathy. "Mrs. Sloan, I assure you, these documents were fully vetted and notarized. Patrick was very clear about securing the financial longevity of the entity." "Entity?" Anna repeated, looking directly at Rebecca. "Is that what 40 years of our lives is called now?" Rebecca leaned forward, folding her hands over the documents. She looked at Anna not with malice, but with a terrifying clinical pragmatism. "Anna, I know this is difficult to hear so soon after the funeral," Rebecca said, her voice dripping with calculated patience. "But Patrick and I had long discussions about this. You were his anchor, his heart, but the foundation has evolved. It's no longer a neighborhood charity. It requires aggressive financial management, corporate restructuring, and dynamic leadership. Patrick knew you didn't have the desire, or the contemporary market literacy, to navigate the next phase of our acquisitions. He wanted to protect you from the burden, and he trusted me to build the empire." He trusted me. The audacity of the statement paralyzed Anna. Rebecca wasn't just taking the money or the power. She was rewriting the history. She was casting Anna as the helpless, out-of-touch elderly wife who needed to be put out to pasture, while she played the role of the visionary savior. "And the house?" Anna asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "The home we bought in 1984? The deed has been absorbed into the corporate trust to leverage its equity for a new downtown initiative, Rebecca replied smoothly. Of course, you are permitted to reside there for the remainder of your life, provided the maintenance costs align with the trust's parameters. Permitted to reside in my own home. Anna felt a strange, cold fire ignite in the pit of her stomach. It wasn't the panic of a victim. It was the absolute crystalline clarity of a woman who realizes she is being robbed in broad daylight by someone smiling at her. She looked around the table. The associates were staring at their laptops. The board members were suddenly very interested in their cuticles. No one was going to speak for her. They had already accepted the new regime. Rebecca reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a small, velvet-lined box. She slid it across the long table. It stopped inches from Anna's hands. Patrick did want you to have this, Rebecca said, her voice softening into something resembling genuine pity, the most insulting emotion of all. He said it belonged to you. Anna looked down. Inside the box was a simple, tarnished silver tie clip. It was the clip she had bought him for their 5th anniversary from a pawn shop because they couldn't afford real jewelry. It was worn at the edges, scratched from decades of use. A silver tie clip, a monthly allowance, a permission slip to live in her own bedroom. Are there any questions, Mrs. Sloane? Sterling asked, clearly eager to conclude the massacre. Anna slowly closed the velvet box. She picked it up, slipping it into her pocket. She picked up her leather briefcase, stood up, and smoothed the front of her coat. She looked at Sterling, then at the board members, and finally, she let her gaze rest on Rebecca. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not threaten lawsuits or hurl accusations. Anna knew the rules of this particular game. Black women who yell in corporate boardrooms are labeled emotional, hysterical, or bitter. They are dismissed. Anna would not give them the satisfaction of a breakdown. No, Arthur, Anna said, her voice steady and chillingly calm. I have no questions for you. Everything here is very clear. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the boardroom. The heavy glass doors sealed shut behind her, cutting off the oxygen to the life she had known. The Uber ride home was a blur of gray streets and rain-slicked pavement. When Anna unlocked her front door, the silence of the house hit her differently this time. It didn't feel empty. It felt violated. She walked into Patrick's study, leaving her coat on the back of a chair. The room smelled faintly of his chicory coffee and old paper. The walls were lined with framed photographs. Anna and Patrick standing with the mayor in '95, Patrick cutting the ribbon at the Sloan Youth Center in 2002, the two of them dancing at a gala. In every picture of the last 15 years, if you looked closely at the background, you could see Rebecca, hovering, smiling, calculating. She had been a shark swimming in their waters for a decade, waiting for the blood. Anna sank into Patrick's heavy leather reading chair. Her hands were shaking now, the delayed adrenaline finally catching up to her. She felt a profound, suffocating sense of failure. She had promised Patrick she would keep the foundation true to its roots. She had promised him she would protect their legacy. And she had lost it all in a 30-minute meeting because she had trusted a system designed by the very people who had just exploited it. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small velvet box. She opened it and took out the silver tie clip. It was heavy in her palm, cold to the touch. She traced her thumb over the smooth, scratched surface. Why this? She thought. Patrick was a meticulous man. Even in the fog of his cancer treatments, his mind operated on a frequency of logic and symbolism. If he had truly signed everything over to Rebecca, he wouldn't have left a sentimental pawn shop trinket as his final message. He would have written a letter explaining his choice. He would have apologized. Patrick never did anything without a reason. Anna held the clip up to the light of the desk lamp. It was a classic spring-loaded design. She pressed the back to open the clasp, expecting to see the familiar grip teeth. It didn't open. She frowned, pressing harder. The spring was jammed, or perhaps glued. Anna reached into the top drawer of Patrick's desk, pulling out a silver letter opener. She wedged the sharp tip of the opener between the two metal plates of the clip and twisted gently. With a tiny metallic snap, the back plate of the tie clip popped off entirely. Anna gasped, dropping the letter opener. The clip wasn't broken. It had been hollowed out. Nestled perfectly inside the tiny, custom-milled cavity of the silver tie clip was a microscopic black object. Anna used her manicured fingernail to carefully pry it out. She held it in her palm, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. It was a micro SD memory card. She stared at it, the breath catching in her throat. Suddenly, the memory of her last lucid conversation with Patrick hit her like a physical blow. It was a week before he slipped into the final coma. He had been holding her hand, his grip surprisingly tight, his eyes wide and feverish. "The garden, Ma," he had whispered, his voice rattling in his chest. "The roots are rotting. I couldn't dig them up. They tied my hands. You have to fix the soil. Look at the silver. Check the silver." She had thought it was the morphine talking. She had thought he was hallucinating about the silver tea set his mother had left him. He wasn't hallucinating. He was leaving her a map. Anna felt a sudden electric surge of energy course through her veins. The crushing weight of grief and the paralyzing humiliation of the boardroom evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharpened focus. Rebecca thought she had executed a flawless corporate takeover. She thought she had erased Anna Sloan from the narrative. She believed that Anna's silence in that boardroom was a sign of surrender, the quiet retreat of an old woman who didn't understand the modern world. But Rebecca had made a fatal miscalculation. She had underestimated the bond between Anna and Patrick. And more importantly, she had underestimated Anna. Anna walked over to the desk, booted up her laptop, and pulled the SD card reader from the drawer. She slid the tiny black square into the slot. A moment later, a single folder appeared on her screen. The title of the folder was a date, the Sunday the World Stopped. Anna clicked it open. Silence was not surrender. Silence was just the sound of Anna reloading. The glow of the laptop screen cast a pale blue light across Anna's face, emphasizing the sharp angles of her cheekbones and the deep exhaustion settling into her eyes. The folder on the screen, named The Sunday the World Stopped, sat there like an unexploded ordnance. Anna's finger hovered over the trackpad. She did not click it. Decades of navigating the treacherous waters of corporate philanthropy alongside Patrick had taught her one fundamental rule: never open a sealed vault until you have the right architect standing beside you. If Rebecca had the foresight to rewrite a multi-million-dollar trust under the guise of legal routine, she certainly had the resources to monitor the IP addresses and digital footprints of the Sloan household. Anna needed a secure environment. More importantly, she needed a mind that operated with the same ruthlessness as Arthur Sterling, but possessed a soul. She needed Daniel. Daniel Cowan was a ghost in the modern legal world, but in the 1980s, he had been a titan. A brilliant, uncompromising black attorney who had marched in Selma as a young man and later built a formidable civil rights and corporate litigation practice in Philadelphia. He had helped Anna and Patrick draft the very first charter for the Sloan Foundation. He had eaten at their table, debated Baldwin and Malcolm X over scotch on their porch, and stood as a pallbearer at the funeral of their only son Marcus, 5 years ago. Daniel had retired after Marcus died, retreating to a quiet life in Mount Airy. Anna hadn't spoken to him in nearly 8 months. She closed her laptop, slid the micro SD card back into the silver tie clip, and placed it securely in her coin purse. She grabbed her coat, walked out into the biting November wind, and hailed a cab. She wouldn't risk taking her own car, just in case it had been fitted with a GPS tracker. Paranoia, perhaps, but Anna was quickly learning that paranoia was simply the corporate term for situational awareness. The drive to Mount Airy took 40 minutes. The rain had turned into a fine, freezing mist. Daniel's house was a beautiful, sprawling stone colonial set back from the street, shrouded by ancient, weeping willow trees. Anna knocked on the heavy oak door. A moment later, the porch light flicked on and the door swung open. Daniel stood there, leaning heavily on a polished mahogany cane. He was 70 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed white beard and eyes that had seen too much of the world to ever be truly surprised. He wore a thick wool cardigan and held a pipe in his free hand. He looked at Anna, standing in the freezing mist. He didn't offer empty condolences or ask how she was holding up. He took one look at the rigid set of her jaw and the cold fire in her eyes and stepped aside. "Come in, Anna." His voice was a deep, resonant baritone, gravelly and warm. "The tea is already hot." The interior of Daniel's home smelled of old paper, pipe tobacco, and cedar. His study was a fortress of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather armchairs, and stacks of legal briefs. He poured 2 cups of black tea, handed one to Anna, and sat across from her. "I was at the funeral, sitting in the back," Daniel said quietly. "I didn't stay for the reception. The flowers were too white, and the lawyers were too eager. It smelled like a hostile takeover. It was, Anna said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. They read the will this morning, or rather the revised trust. Patrick supposedly transferred full executive control to Rebecca 6 weeks ago. My name was scrubbed entirely. I am officially a dependent of the state of Rebecca Sloan. Daniel's grip tightened on his cane. His jaw clenched. Sterling? Sterling, Anna confirmed. He claimed Patrick wanted to protect me from the burden of the Foundation's dynamic growth. Bullshit, Daniel growled, the lawyer in him instantly waking up from its long hibernation. Patrick would have burned that foundation to the ground before he let anyone take your name off the masthead. He was medicated 6 weeks ago. We can contest it on the grounds of diminished capacity and undue influence. That's what I thought, Anna said, setting her tea down. She opened her purse and pulled out the silver tie clip. Until Rebecca handed me this. Said Patrick wanted me to have it. She popped the back plate off and extracted the tiny black memory card, sliding it across the polished wooden desk. Daniel looked at the micro SD card, his eyes narrowing. Without a word, he stood up, walked over to a heavy iron safe in the corner of the room, and pulled out an older, thick laptop. Air-gapped, Daniel explained, setting it on the desk. No Wi-Fi card, no Bluetooth. If there's a tracking script or malware on this card, it dies in this machine. He inserted the SD card via a USB adapter. The screen illuminated, reflecting in Daniel's glasses. One folder, Daniel muttered. The Sunday the world stopped. Anna felt her breath hitch. The Sunday the world stopped. Daniel, that's the day Marcus died. Daniel paused, his eyes meeting hers. The shared grief hung between them for a heavy second. Marcus, Anna, and Patrick's son, Rebecca's late husband, had died in a sudden tragic car accident on a rainy Sunday evening. Daniel clicked the folder. A password prompt appeared. Try his date of birth, Anna whispered. Daniel typed it in. Access denied. Try the date he died, Anna said, her voice tightening. Daniel typed the numbers. The prompt vanished, replaced by a window containing 2 files. One was an audio file named confession.wave. The other was an encrypted spreadsheet titled the_bleed.xlsx. We start with the audio, Daniel said softly, adjusting the volume. He pressed play. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of heavy, labored breathing and the rhythmic beep of a hospital heart monitor. Then a voice broke through the static. Ma, Anna closed her eyes. It was Patrick. His voice was thin, raspy, stripped of its usual booming vitality. It was the voice of a man standing on the very edge of the abyss. If you are listening to this, it means I'm gone, and Rebecca has played her hand. Patrick's recorded voice echoed in the quiet study. It means she took the foundation, and it means you are angry. You have every right to be, Ma. But I need you to listen to me carefully. I am not crazy. I am not confused. I knew exactly what I was signing when I gave her control. Anna's eyes snapped open. Daniel leaned forward, his brow furrowed in deep confusion. I had to do it, Anna. Patrick's voice cracked with a devastating mixture of sorrow and shame. I had to buy time, because if I fought her, she was going to destroy Marcus. The room went dead silent, save for the crackle of the recording. 2 months ago, Rebecca came to my hospital room, Patrick continued, pausing to take a painful, wheezing breath. She didn't bring flowers. She brought an audit file from 5 years ago, from Marcus's private investment firm. Ma, our boy, he was drowning. He made terrible trades, illegal trades. He lost millions of dollars of client money. To cover it up, he used his access to the Sloan Foundation's holding accounts. He embezzled from our charity to plug the holes in his firm. Anna felt the blood drain from her face. Her stomach plummeted into a cold, terrifying void. Marcus, her brilliant, charming boy, he had stolen from the very community they had bled to protect. Rebecca found out after he died. Patrick's voice wept through the speakers. She's a financial genius, Anna. She spent the last 5 years quietly moving money, restructuring our funds, burying his crimes deep inside corporate shell companies so no one would ever know. She saved his reputation. She saved our foundation from a federal scandal that would have destroyed everything we built. Patrick paused, coughing violently before catching his breath. But it wasn't out of loyalty. It was an investment. When the cancer came back, she cashed it in. She told me that if I didn't sign the foundation over to her, she would release the unredacted files. She would expose Marcus. The FBI would seize our assets. Our legacy would be a cautionary tale of fraud, and our son would be remembered as a thief. A single tear tracked down Anna's cheek, hot and stinging. It was a twist so cruel, so perfectly engineered, that it took her breath away. Rebecca hadn't manipulated a dying man's confused mind. She had put a gun to the head of his child's memory. Patrick had sacrificed his own life's work and Anna's security to shield their dead son from the judgment of history. "I signed the papers," Patrick whispered, his voice fading. "I gave her the keys to the kingdom. But she underestimated me, Ma. She thought I would just lay down and die. She thinks the foundation is hers to pillage now. But I used my last weeks to track her movements. She's not just holding the foundation hostage. She's bleeding it dry. The spreadsheet on this drive, it's the key, but the digital records aren't enough. They can be deleted, manipulated. You need the physical ledger. I took copies of the real ledgers, the raw numbers. I hid them in the one place her corporate lawyers would never think to look. The old safe deposit box at the West Philly Community Credit Union. Box 402. The key is taped beneath the bottom drawer of my desk at home. The recording fell silent for a long time. When Patrick spoke again, it was a fragile, loving whisper. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I leave you with a war I couldn't finish. But I know you, Ma. They see an old widow. They don't know the woman who stared down the banks in '85. Find the ledger. Follow the bleed. Take our name back. I love you." The audio clicked off. The silence that followed was suffocating. Anna stared at the black screen of the laptop. The image of her son, Marcus, smiling at his college graduation, flashed in her mind, immediately followed by the cold, calculating face of Rebecca in the boardroom. The grief was gone now. It had been entirely consumed by an icy, towering rage. Daniel exhaled a long, shaky breath, rubbing his temples. "Lord have mercy, Marcus. I never suspected. He was always so careful." "He was desperate," Anna said, her voice shockingly steady. It didn't sound like her own voice. It sounded like steel. And Rebecca capitalized on a dead man's desperation. Daniel looked at her, assessing her state. "Anna, if we expose Rebecca's current fraud, we risk exposing Marcus's past crimes. The authorities will pull the thread. The foundation could still burn." "No," Anna said, standing up. The fatigue that had weighed her down for weeks had vanished. She stood tall, her shoulders squared, a matriarch preparing for a siege. "Rebecca thinks she trapped us in a zero-sum game. She thinks I will stay silent to protect Marcus. But she forgot something very important about the woman who built that foundation." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I don't play games I didn't design," Anna said coldly. "Open the spreadsheet, Daniel. Let's see how much she's bleeding us." Daniel nodded, a grim smile touching the corners of his mouth. He clicked on the _bleed.xlsx. The spreadsheet was a masterclass in forensic accounting, compiled by a dying man with nothing left to lose. It outlined a complex web of financial transactions over the last 8 months. While Patrick was in chemotherapy, Rebecca had been establishing a network of LLCs in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. They were listed under generic names: Apex Solutions, Meridian Holdings, Vanguard Consulting. "Look at this," Daniel said, tracing a thick finger across the screen. "She's been authorizing massive consulting fees and administrative grants from the Foundation's primary endowment into these LLCs. It's layering, a classic embezzlement technique." "She's not just running the Foundation," Anna realized, her eyes scanning the millions of dollars siphoned away. "She's emptying it. She's cashing out before anyone notices the rot. And because she's the sole trustee, she has the legal authority to authorize these transfers," Daniel explained, his tone professional, detached. "On paper, to an outside auditor, it looks like aggressive corporate restructuring, high-risk, high-reward investments. But the physical ledger Patrick hid, that will show where the money actually terminates. It will show her personal accounts." "She used my son's sins as a shield to commit her own," Anna said, the pieces of the puzzle locking together with terrifying clarity. "She knew Patrick wouldn't blow the whistle, and she assumed I was too old, too grieving, and too ignorant of modern finance to ever find out." Anna walked to the window, looking out at the freezing rain lashing against the glass. The city of Philadelphia stretched out beyond the trees, a city she had spent 40 years trying to heal. "Daniel," she said, her breath fogging the cold glass. "Tomorrow morning I need you to go to the West Philly Credit Union. I'll get the key from Patrick's desk tonight. You retrieve that ledger." "And then what?" Daniel asked, closing the laptop and pulling the SD card out. "We can't just take this to the police. If she gets arrested, she'll leak Marcus's files out of spite. Mutual destruction." "We aren't going to the police." Anna turned around, her silhouette framed by the dark window. "We are going to do exactly what she did. We are going to build a trap. She's surrounded by corporate lawyers, Anna. She has Arthur Sterling covering her tracks." "Arthur Sterling is a coward in a $3,000 suit," Anna replied dismissively. "Rebecca built a fortress of paper, but paper burns, Daniel, especially when you light the match from the inside." She walked back to the desk, picking up the silver tie clip and carefully replacing the SD card inside. It was no longer a trinket. It was the ignition key to a war machine. "We need a witness," Anna said, her mind already moving 3 steps ahead. "Someone on the inside. Someone who signed those revised trust documents 6 weeks ago." Daniel thought for a moment, pulling a notepad toward him. The witnesses on the revised trust were 2 junior legal assistants from Sterling's firm. One of them is a young woman, Ava Kendall. I remember seeing her name on the notary line. "Ava Kendall," Anna repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "She is the weak link in Rebecca's armor. People like Rebecca don't do the dirty work themselves. They make underlings do it, and underlings carry guilt." Daniel looked at his old friend. The grieving widow who had walked into his house an hour ago was entirely gone. In her place stood the fierce, brilliant strategist who had once taken on the city's housing authority and won. "Are you sure about this, Anna?" Daniel asked softly. "Once we start pulling these threads, there is no going back. It will be ugly. It will be corporate blood sport." Anna buttoned her coat, picking up her leather briefcase. "My son's memory has been held hostage," Anna said, her voice echoing in the quiet, cedar-scented room. "My husband died in agony, fighting a battle in the dark, and my legacy was stolen by a thief wearing designer grief." She opened the heavy oak door, letting the freezing wind whip into the hallway. "I am a 66-year-old black woman in America, Daniel," Anna said, looking over her shoulder with a gaze that could cut through steel. "Ugly is just the weather I walk in. Let the blood sport begin." The neon sign of Ray's Diner buzzed with a low, erratic hum, casting a flickering red glow across the wet pavement of 4th Street. It was a relic of old Philadelphia, a place that smelled permanently of scorched coffee and fried potatoes, far removed from the polished marble lobbies of Arthur Sterling's corporate law firm. Anna sat in a cracked vinyl booth near the back, nursing a mug of black coffee she had no intention of drinking. She wore a simple beige trench coat, a silk scarf pulled up around her neck, blending perfectly into the late-night anonymity of the diner. She checked her watch. 10:15 p.m. According to the private investigator Daniel had retained for a brisk 48-hour background check, Ava Kendall finished her shift at the firm at 7, took the subway to a pediatric clinic in Center City to visit her daughter, and always stopped at this diner for a late dinner before taking the bus back to her small apartment in West Philly. At exactly 10:20 p.m., the bell above the diner door jingled. Ava Kendall walked in. She was younger than Anna had expected. Perhaps 32, though exhaustion had aged her. She wore a damp wool peacoat over her corporate skirt suit, and she carried a canvas tote bag that looked heavy enough to snap her shoulder. Her face was pale, devoid of makeup, and her eyes carried the hollow, haunted look of a woman running on fumes and borrowed time. Ava ordered a grilled cheese to go and sat at the counter, rubbing her temples. Anna picked up her coffee mug, slid out of her booth, and walked over. She didn't announce herself loudly. She simply took the empty stool next to the young woman and placed her mug on the Formica counter. "You look exactly the way I did in 1981, Anna said softly, not looking at Ava, but straight ahead at the pie display case. "Working 14-hour days, carrying the weight of the world in a canvas bag, wondering if the exhaustion will kill you before the debt does." Ava froze. She turned her head slowly, her eyes widening in immediate recognition. In the corporate halls, Anna Sloan had been an abstract concept, the grieving widow, the collateral damage. But sitting here in the diner, Anna was a terrifyingly real presence. "Mrs. Sloan," Ava breathed, her voice trembling. Her instinct was to run. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles turning white. I shouldn't be speaking to you, Mr. Sterling gave strict instructions that all communications regarding the estate must go through. Arthur Sterling is asleep in a multi-million-dollar brownstone, Anna interrupted, her voice a calm, steady river. He is not here, and I am not here to talk to you about the estate, Ava. I am here to talk to you about Maya. Ava flinched as if she had been struck. All the corporate training, all the legal deflections vanished, leaving only the sheer, raw panic of a mother. How do you know about my daughter? I know that she is 6 years old, Anna said, turning to finally look the young woman in the eyes. The warmth and deep, enduring sorrow in Anna's gaze disarmed Ava entirely. I know she was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 8 months ago. I know your health insurance through the firm capped out in September. And I know that the specialized immunotherapy she is receiving at Children's Hospital costs upwards of $12,000 a month. Ava's breathing grew shallow. A tear spilled over her lower lash line, cutting a path through the exhaustion on her face. Please, Mrs. Sloane, please don't do this. I am not your enemy, Ava, Anna said gently. She reached into her trench coat pocket and pulled out a small manila envelope, sliding it across the counter. Look inside. Ava's trembling fingers opened the flap. Inside were photocopies of 3 wire transfers, routed from a subsidiary account of the Sloan Foundation into a medical escrow account in Maya Kendall's name. The transfers were authorized by Rebecca Sloan. When Patrick and I built the foundation, we designed it to help people like you, Anna said, her tone shifting from gentle to fiercely protective. But we did not design it to buy hostages. Rebecca didn't give you a grant out of the goodness of her heart. She bought your conscience. She found the most vulnerable, desperate person in Arthur Sterling's office, and she tied a leash around your neck. Ava covered her mouth, a stifled sob escaping her throat. She looked around the diner, terrified, but the few remaining patrons were oblivious. She told me it was a discretionary grant, Ava whispered, the confession spilling out of her like blood from a wound. She said the foundation had a quiet fund for employee emergencies. I was drowning, Mrs. Sloane. Maya was getting worse. The hospital was threatening to pause treatments. I would have sold my soul to keep her alive. I know, Anna said softly. I lost my son 5 years ago. I would have burned the city to the ground if I thought it could have saved him. I do not judge you for taking the money, Ava. I judge the woman who weaponized your child's illness. Anna leaned closer, the space between them crackling with sudden intensity. But a soul is an expensive thing to buy, Anna continued. What did she ask you to do to earn it? Ava closed her eyes, the tears flowing freely now. It was a Sunday evening, 6 weeks ago. The office was empty. Rebecca brought me into the main conference room. There was a stack of trust amendments on the table. She told me to sign as the witnessing notary. And Patrick? Anna asked, though she already knew the answer. Was my husband in the room? Ava shook her head violently. No, he wasn't there. His signatures were already on the pages. They looked shaky, like someone had guided his hand or traced them. I told her I couldn't notarize a document without the signatory present. It's a felony. I told her I could lose my license, go to jail. And what did she say? She reminded me that the foundation's discretionary grant was under her direct oversight. Ava sobbed quietly. She said if the trust wasn't finalized that night, the foundation's accounts would freeze, and Maya's medical escrow would be suspended the next morning. She told me to choose between my ethics and my daughter's life. The sheer sociopathic cruelty of it settled over Anna like a heavy blanket. Rebecca hadn't just committed fraud. She had emotionally extorted a desperate mother. She had played God. I signed them, Ava wept, burying her face in her hands. I stamped them. I handed your life over to her, and I hate myself every single day for it. Anna reached out and placed her hand over Ava's trembling fingers. It was a warm, firm, anchoring touch. Listen to me, Anna commanded quietly. Ava looked up, her eyes red and fearful. Rebecca thinks she trapped you, but the money she gave you was stolen. It didn't belong to her. It belonged to the foundation, which means it belonged to Patrick and me. Consider Maya's treatments fully funded by the true founders. Ava stared at her, disbelief warring with hope. I don't understand. I need an affidavit, Ava, Anna said, her voice dropping to a serious, uncompromising register. I need a sworn, notarized statement from you detailing exactly what happened that Sunday night, the coercion, the absentee signature, the blackmail, everything. If I do that, Sterling will fire me. They'll blacklist me in this city. I'll go to prison for notary fraud. You won't, Anna assured her, her eyes locking onto Ava's with the intensity of a general outlining a battle plan. My attorney is Daniel Cowan. He will secure you federal whistleblower protection before the sun comes up. He will negotiate full immunity for your cooperation. You will not see the inside of a cell, and Maya's medical bills will be covered by a legitimate trust I will set up myself. But I need the weapon, Ava. I need you to hand me the sword. Ava looked at the photocopies of the wire transfers, then at her own reflection in the dark diner window. She thought of Rebecca's cold, triumphant smile and the suffocating weight of the secret she had carried for 6 weeks. Slowly, Ava wiped her face with the back of her sleeve. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the panic receding, replaced by a fragile but genuine resolve. "Where do I sign?" she asked. The grandfather clock in Daniel Cowan's study chimed 2 in the morning, but neither Anna nor Daniel felt the hour. The room was thick with the smell of old paper and fresh ink. On the center of the massive mahogany desk lay the prize, the physical ledger. Daniel had retrieved it from the West Philly Community Credit Union that morning. It was a heavy, archaic thing, a green cloth-bound book filled with thick, textured paper. It was the kind of ledger accountants used before everything moved to the cloud, and it was full of Patrick's meticulous, unmistakable handwriting. He always trusted paper more than pixels, Anna murmured, tracing her fingers over the columns of numbers her husband had painstakingly recorded while his body was failing him. "And thank God for that," Daniel said, adjusting his reading glasses. He had his air-gapped laptop open next to the ledger, the encrypted spreadsheet glowing brightly. A digital file can be altered, its metadata manipulated. A defense attorney could argue a hacker planted the spreadsheet. But this? He tapped the heavy ledger. This is physical evidence. It proves intent. It proves Patrick knew he was under duress. They had spent the last 4 hours cross-referencing the digital spreadsheet with the physical ledger. The picture it painted was not just embezzlement. It was a masterful corporate plundering. Look at the layering, Daniel pointed to a cluster of entries. Rebecca authorized grants to Meridian Holdings for urban development consulting. The digital spreadsheet shows the money leaving the foundation. But Patrick's physical ledger, which he compiled by secretly accessing the bank's raw transit routing numbers, shows where it landed. Anna leaned in. An offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Exactly, Daniel said grimly. An account registered to a blind trust. But if we subpoena the formation documents of that trust, I guarantee you Rebecca Sloane's name, or a proxy she controls, is at the bottom of it. She's siphoned almost $4 million in the last 8 months. It's not enough, Anna said abruptly, stepping back from the desk. Daniel frowned, looking at her over the rim of his glasses. Anna, $4 million in wire fraud, combined with Ava Kendall's affidavit proving the trust was signed under duress, is a nuclear bomb. It's enough to put her in federal prison for 20 years. You're thinking like a prosecutor, Daniel. Think like Rebecca, Anna challenged, pacing the length of the study. Her mind was moving with frightening speed. If we go to the authorities with this, she gets arrested. But what happens the moment she's backed into a corner? Daniel's face darkened. She leaks the files on Marcus. Exactly, Anna said, her voice hard. She releases the unredacted audit of my son's firm. The press gets hold of it. Son of philanthropy titans embezzled millions. That will be the headline. The foundation's reputation will be irreparably destroyed. All our active grants will be frozen by the state. The charities relying on us will go bankrupt. Rebecca goes down, but she pulls the temple down with her. Anna stopped pacing and looked at the ledger. We cannot arrest her. We have to break her. We need a piece of evidence so damning, so utterly indefensible, that she doesn't even dare to fight back. We need something that proves she isn't just a thief, but a predator. She walked back to the desk, staring at the pages. Go to the last week of his life, the week he died. Daniel scrolled down the spreadsheet, matching the dates with the final, shaky pages of the physical ledger. October 10th, 2 days before he slipped into the coma. There's a flurry of small transactions. Paying off legal retainers, finalizing Sterling's fees for the trust transition. Keep going, Anna urged. Go to the 14th, the day he passed. Daniel flipped a page in the ledger. His finger traced down the column. He stopped. The silence in the room suddenly became absolute. "My God," Daniel whispered. "What is it?" Daniel looked up at Anna, his eyes wide with a mixture of professional awe and profound disgust. He turned the laptop screen toward her. There, on the final line of the spreadsheet, was a single massive transaction. Transfer to Vanguard Consulting LLC, Cayman Routing. Amount $2 million. Authorization digital signature. Patrick M. Sloan. Timestamp October 14th, 11:42 p.m. Anna stared at the timestamp. The numbers blurred, then sharpened, stabbing into her brain. 11:42 p.m. The memory hit her like a physical blow. The sterile smell of the hospice room. The agonizing, drawn-out silence between Patrick's breaths. The sudden flatline wail of the heart monitor. The nurse stepping in, checking his pulse, and looking at the clock on the wall. Time of death, 11:42 p.m. Anna gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles turning white. Her chest heaved as a sickening realization washed over her. "She timed it," Anna whispered, her voice laced with an icy, terrifying fury. "She had the wire transfer preloaded," Daniel deduced, his voice low and dangerous. She knew that once Patrick officially died, the estate would immediately lock into probate. All accounts would freeze until the new trust was validated. She needed one final massive payout while his digital authorization was theoretically still valid. "She didn't just steal from a dying man," Anna said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "She waited for his heart to stop beating. She sat at her computer, waited for the phone call from the hospital, and the moment I lost my husband, she pressed send. She charged us $2 million for his last breath. It was the ultimate corporate sociopathy. It wasn't just illegal, it was evil." "This is it, Anna," Daniel said, closing the ledger with a heavy thud. "This is the kill shot. A timestamp cannot be argued. She executed a transaction using the credentials of a deceased man. It elevates this from corporate embezzlement to aggravated wire fraud and identity theft against a corpse. If a jury sees this timestamp alongside a death certificate, they won't just convict her, they will crucify her." Anna didn't reply immediately. She looked at the silver tie clip resting next to the laptop. She thought of Ava, crying in the diner. She thought of Patrick, spending his final, agonizing days mapping out a war he wouldn't live to fight. And she thought of Rebecca, sitting in the boardroom, smiling as she handed Anna an allowance. The grief that had anchored her to the floor for weeks was completely incinerated. Anna Sloan was no longer a widow in mourning. She was the architect of a reckoning. "The board of directors is meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. to officially ratify Rebecca's position as the sole executive managing partner," Anna said. Her voice was devoid of emotion, a perfectly calibrated weapon. "Are you going to send this to the FBI?" Daniel asked. "No," Anna said, picking up her coat. She turned to Daniel, her eyes blazing with a cold, unstoppable fire. "Draft the preliminary forensic audit, print the wire transfers, print Ava Kendall's sworn affidavit, and put that timestamp in bold red ink." "Anna, what are you going to do?" "I am going to attend a board meeting," Anna said, tying her silk scarf around her neck. "And I am going to teach my daughter-in-law the true meaning of a hostile takeover." The boardroom of the Sloan Foundation was a masterpiece of modern corporate architecture, a suspended glass box on the 42nd floor that offered a panoramic, godlike view of the Philadelphia skyline. It was designed to make those inside feel invincible, and those outside feel small. At 2:15 p.m., Rebecca Sloan stood at the head of the long mahogany table, perfectly framed by the skyline behind her. She wore a tailored white blazer that projected an aura of unblemished authority. The 12 members of the board of directors, a mix of banking executives, local politicians, and wealthy philanthropists, sat with their attention fixed on her. "In conclusion," Rebecca said, her voice projecting with practiced, warm confidence, "the restructuring of the Sloan Trust is not merely a legal transition. It is a necessary evolution. Patrick's vision brought us here, but to navigate the modern philanthropic landscape, we require dynamic, aggressive capital management. With your ratification today, I am prepared to lead this foundation into its next 50 years. Arthur Sterling, sitting to her right, offered a sycophantic nod and reached for his pen to sign the official ratification ledger. "Well said, Rebecca. If there are no objections from the board, I will move to formally record the executive transition." The heavy, frosted glass doors of the boardroom swung open. They did not bang or crash. They were pushed open with a steady, unstoppable force. Every head in the room turned. Anna Sloane walked in. She did not look like the grieving, discarded widow from a week ago. She wore a sharply tailored midnight blue suit that commanded the space the moment she crossed the threshold. Her silver hair was swept up flawlessly, and pinned to her left lapel, gleaming under the recessed lighting, was the scratched silver tie clip. A step behind her was Daniel Cowan. He leaned on his mahogany cane, dressed in a classic three-piece charcoal suit, carrying a thick black leather briefcase. He looked exactly like what he was, a titan of the old guard who had returned from the grave to deliver a reckoning. "Arthur!" Daniel's gravelly baritone boomed through the room, cutting through the sterile air like a thunderclap. "Put the pen down. You are about to authorize a federal crime." Sterling's pen hovered an inch above the paper. His face paled. "Daniel, what is the meaning of this? This is a closed executive session. Mrs. Sloane has no legal standing in this room." Anna did not say a word. She walked slowly, deliberately, down the length of the table. The board members, many of whom had known her for decades, instinctively pulled their chairs back, making way for her. She stopped directly opposite Rebecca. Rebecca's perfectly manicured hands gripped the edges of the podium. A flicker of genuine panic breached her composed exterior, but she quickly suppressed it. "Anna," Rebecca said, trying to inject an air of patronizing patience into her voice. "This is highly inappropriate. If you have grievances regarding your stipend, Arthur can schedule a private mediation next week." Anna remained entirely silent. In corporate America, silence is a weapon that makes people deeply uncomfortable. It demands to be filled. And as Anna stood there, her eyes locked onto Rebecca's with the cold, immovable weight of a glacier, the silence began to suffocate the room. Anna reached out and placed 3 items on the center of the mahogany table. First, the heavy green cloth-bound physical ledger. Second, a thick stack of printed, red-lined financial documents. Third, a single notarized manila envelope. She stepped back, folded her hands in front of her, and looked at Daniel. "Members of the board," Daniel addressed the room, leaning his weight onto his cane. "My name is Daniel Cowan. I am the founding legal counsel of this institution, and I currently represent Anna Sloane. What you have before you is not a ratification of leadership. It is the culmination of a hostile takeover built on extortion, coercion, and multi-million-dollar wire fraud." A collective gasp rippled around the table. The chairman of the board, a retired bank executive, stood up. "Mr. Cowan, those are catastrophic allegations. You better have the paper to back that up, or Sterling will have you disbarred by Friday." "The paper is right there, Jim," Daniel said, pointing a thick finger at the stack. "Let's start with the notarized envelope. Inside is a sworn, immunized affidavit from a legal assistant at Arthur Sterling's firm. It details how 6 weeks ago, Rebecca Sloane coerced her into notarizing the revised trust documents, while Patrick Sloane was entirely absent from the room. It was executed under the explicit threat of terminating medical funding for the assistant's terminally ill 6-year-old child. Sterling leaped to his feet, his chair crashing backward. "That is an outrageous lie. I oversaw those documents myself." "You were asleep in your townhouse, Arthur," Daniel snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. "The metadata on the firm's servers, which we have already secured, confirms the documents were generated on a Sunday night at 7:43 p.m. Unless you have developed the ability to bilocate, you are either guilty of severe negligence or you are a co-conspirator to fraud. I suggest you sit down and consider your next words very carefully before you implicate yourself in a federal indictment." Sterling looked at Rebecca, then at the documents on the table. The blood drained from his face. The instinct of a corporate lawyer kicked in instantly. Self-preservation. Sterling slowly picked up his fallen chair and sat down, physically inching away from Rebecca. Rebecca was breathing fast now, her chest rising and falling beneath the white blazer. "This is absurd. Patrick signed those papers. He knew the foundation needed dynamic restructuring." Anna still did not speak. She simply stared at Rebecca, a matriarch watching a thief drown in her own lies. "Let's talk about that dynamic restructuring," Daniel continued, moving to the physical ledger. "For the last 8 months, Rebecca has been utilizing her interim privileges to funnel approximately $4 million of foundation endowment into 3 offshore LLCs in the Cayman Islands: Meridian Holdings, Apex Solutions, and Vanguard Consulting. All 3 are blind trusts. All 3 are ultimately controlled by proxies linked to Rebecca Sloane." The boardroom erupted into chaotic murmurs. Board members scrambled to grab the red-lined financial documents Anna had placed on the table, flipping through the undeniable proof of the layered wire transfers. "That money was for high-yield overseas investments," Rebecca shouted, her composure finally shattering. "It's standard aggressive portfolio management. You are looking at incomplete ledgers." "Then let's look at the final entry," Daniel said softly. The sudden drop in his volume forced the entire room to quiet down to hear him. Daniel opened the green ledger to the final page and placed it flat on the table, right in front of the board chairman. $2 million, Daniel read, his voice heavy with disgust. "Wired to Vanguard Consulting, authorized by the digital signature of Patrick Sloan." "A perfectly legal final authorization," Rebecca spat, though her hands were trembling violently now. "Look at the timestamp, Jim," Daniel instructed the chairman. The older man pushed his glasses up his nose, squinting at the red ink. 11:42 p.m., October 14th. The chairman froze. He looked up, his face a mask of horror. "Good God. Patrick died on the 14th. Patrick Sloan's official time of death was 11:42 p.m., Daniel stated, the words dropping like anvils onto the mahogany table. Rebecca Sloan sat at her terminal and waited for her father-in-law to take his final breath. And in the exact minute his heart stopped, before probate could freeze the accounts, she wired $2 million out of this charity. That is not portfolio management. That is identity theft of a deceased individual. It is aggravated wire fraud, and it carries a mandatory federal prison sentence. Silence reclaimed the room, but this time it was not the suffocating silence of Rebecca's power. It was the devastating radioactive silence of total annihilation. The board members practically shoved the documents away from them, as if touching the paper would infect them with the crime. They were wealthy, connected people. The one thing they feared more than losing money was an IRS and FBI forensic audit. "Mrs. Sloan," the chairman said, turning to Anna. His voice was trembling. What are your demands?" Anna finally spoke. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It was the calm, grounded voice of a woman who owned the earth she stood on. "Arthur," Anna said, not looking at the lawyer, but keeping her eyes locked on Rebecca. "You are going to draft a reversion document, right now, reinstating the original trust, restoring my sole executive conservatorship, and accepting the immediate, unconditional resignation of Rebecca Sloan." I can have it typed up in 10 minutes, Sterling stammered, already pulling his laptop open. "No," Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. She looked around the table, searching for an ally, a lifeline. The board members wouldn't even meet her eyes. She was a pariah. "Anna, please, you don't understand. You will sign the resignation," Anna continued, her tone absolute. "You will surrender all digital access tokens to Daniel Cowan. If you do this, I will grant you 48 hours to pack your personal belongings and leave the state of Pennsylvania. If you refuse, Daniel will press send on an email containing every document on this table to the Philadelphia District Attorney, the IRS Compliance Office, and the FBI White Collar Crimes Division." Anna took a single step closer to the podium. "Sign the paper, Rebecca, or leave this building in handcuffs. The choice is yours." 10 minutes later, the only sound in the boardroom was the scratching of a platinum pen against paper. Rebecca's hand shook so badly she could barely form her own signature. When it was done, the board members filed out of the room as fast as their legs could carry them, desperate to distance themselves from the blast radius. Arthur Sterling packed his briefcase in silence and practically fled to the elevators. Daniel Cowan carefully gathered the signed reversion documents, nodded respectfully to Anna, and stepped out into the hallway, closing the heavy glass doors behind him. Only Anna and Rebecca remained. The power dynamic of the room had inverted completely. The brilliant, cold CEO was gone. Rebecca sank into a leather chair, her white blazer suddenly looking entirely too large for her. She pulled her knees up, burying her face in her hands. A wretched, agonizing sob tore through her throat. Anna did not gloat. She simply stood by the window, looking out over the city. "You think I'm a monster?" Rebecca cried, her voice muffled by her hands. "You think I stole that money because I wanted to be rich, because I'm greedy?" "I think you are a thief," Anna said coldly. "The motivation is irrelevant to the crime." "It's not irrelevant," Rebecca suddenly shouted, dropping her hands. Her face was streaked with mascara, her eyes red and feral. "I didn't steal it for yachts, Anna. I didn't steal it to buy summer homes. I stole it to plug a hole. Anna turned around slowly. What hole? Rebecca let out a hollow, bitter laugh, the sound of a woman whose sanity was fraying at the edges. 5 years ago, before Marcus died. He was drowning in his firm, yes. He embezzled from the foundation, yes. I told Patrick I fixed it. I told him I moved the money around and saved Marcus's reputation. You did, Anna said, her brow furrowing. Patrick's recording confirmed you covered Marcus's tracks. I didn't cover them with magic, Anna, Rebecca screamed, tears spilling down her cheeks. I covered them by taking a massive, highly leveraged margin loan from a private equity firm in New York. I borrowed millions in my own name to quietly replace the foundation's missing funds before the annual audit caught Marcus's theft. I saved your son from federal prison. I saved this foundation from a scandal that would have destroyed it. Anna stood frozen. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. But the market turned, Rebecca whispered, the fight draining out of her, leaving only the pathetic shell of a terrified woman. The investments I made to pay back the loan collapsed. The debt ballooned. The equity firm was going to call in the loan. If I defaulted, they would have seized my assets, audited my history, and the entire paper trail leading back to Marcus's embezzlement would have been exposed anyway. Rebecca looked up at Anna, her eyes pleading for understanding from a corporate mind, if not a mother's heart. I couldn't fail, Rebecca sobbed. I couldn't be the one who lost the empire. So I started siphoning the foundation's endowment into the Cayman LLCs. Not to keep it, but to pay off the private equity vultures. That $2 million wire transfer on the night Patrick died? That was the final balloon payment. The debt is clear, Anna. The shell companies are empty. The money didn't go into my pocket. It went to burying your son's sins once and for all. The silence that followed was suffocating. Anna stared at her daughter-in-law. For weeks, Anna had viewed Rebecca as a cartoonish villain, a one-dimensional, greedy corporate shark who had preyed on a dying man. But the truth was far more complex and infinitely more tragic. Rebecca was a victim of her own toxic corporate pride. She was an overachiever who had tied her entire self-worth to her ability to fix things. When Marcus failed, she took on his burden to prove she was the ultimate manager. When her own financial fix failed, her pride wouldn't allow her to admit defeat, go to Patrick, and ask for help. Instead, she chose to commit a catastrophic cascade of crimes, rationalizing it in her twisted mind as protecting the family legacy. She had destroyed the family to save the business. You thought you were a savior, Anna said quietly, the anger in her voice replaced by a profound, heavy sorrow. You thought because you sat in the big chair and moved millions of dollars you were protecting us. I did protect you, Rebecca wept, looking at the floor. Marcus died a respected man. Patrick died believing the foundation was safe. I carried the dirt so you could keep your clean hands, Anna. No, Anna corrected her, walking slowly toward the chair. You didn't carry the dirt, Rebecca. You just buried it under the floorboards of our house and hoped the rot wouldn't smell. Anna stopped a few feet away from the broken woman. If you had come to me 5 years ago, if you had told me Marcus stole the money and you were drowning in debt trying to cover it, we would have faced it, Anna said, her voice carrying the weight of 40 years of hard-fought wisdom. We would have liquidated our assets. We would have paid the debt legally. We would have held a press conference, admitted our son's failures, and taken the hit. Because the foundation's strength was never in its bank accounts. It was in our integrity. Rebecca shook her head, unable to comprehend that kind of vulnerability. The corporate world would have eaten you alive. Let them eat, Anna said fiercely. I survived Jim Crow. I survived bank redlining. I survived burying my only child. You think a bad press cycle scares me? Rebecca looked up, her expression a mix of awe and complete devastation. She finally understood. She had spent a decade trying to outmaneuver a woman whose strength was forged in fires Rebecca couldn't even imagine. What happens now? Rebecca whispered. Now, Anna said, turning her back and walking toward the boardroom doors. You take your 48 hours, you pack your things, and you leave Philadelphia. If I ever see your face in this city again, or if you ever breathe a word of my son's failures to justify your own, Daniel Cowan will release the files, and you will spend the rest of your life in a federal penitentiary. Anna opened the heavy glass door. You wanted to be the dynamic CEO, Rebecca, Anna said, looking over her shoulder one last time. Consider this your final severance package. The door clicked shut, leaving Rebecca Sloane completely alone in the glass box she had sacrificed her soul to conquer. The elevator descent from the 42nd floor felt like falling through a vacuum. Anna stood perfectly still, watching the digital numbers flash as they counted down to the lobby. The heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom were a lifetime away now, but the echo of Rebecca's weeping still rang in her ears. When the polished steel doors parted at the ground floor, the chaotic hum of the Philadelphia streets rushed in. Daniel Cowan was waiting by the security desk. He had already signaled for his driver. They walked out into the biting November wind in silence. Daniel opened the heavy door of his Lincoln Town car, and Anna slid into the leather back seat. Daniel climbed in beside her and tapped the glass partition, signaling the driver to pull away from the curb. For the first 10 minutes of the ride, the only sound was the rhythmic thumping of the tires over the uneven asphalt of Market Street. Anna stared out the window, watching the gray city blur past. She had won. She had reclaimed the foundation, expelled the usurper, and secured the endowment. It was a flawless, bloodless victory. So why did it feel like a tombstone had just been placed on her chest? Anna. Daniel's voice was a low, gentle rumble in the quiet car. Anna blinked, and without warning, the dam broke. The stoic, unbreakable matriarch who had just brought a boardroom of corporate titans to their knees suddenly gasped for air. She pressed her gloved hands over her face, her shoulders shaking violently as a raw, guttural sob tore itself from her throat. It wasn't a cry of relief. It was the agonizing, delayed grief of a mother who had just buried her child for the second time. Daniel didn't offer hollow comforts. He didn't tell her it was going to be all right. He simply slid across the seat, wrapped his heavy, wool-clad arm around her trembling shoulders, and let her weep against his chest. He held her just as he had held her 5 years ago at Marcus's graveside. "My boy," Anna wept, the words barely intelligible. "Daniel, my boy. He was a thief. He stole from the people we promised to protect. He was a desperate young man who made a catastrophic mistake," Daniel murmured, his voice thick with his own sorrow. He let the pressure of this city, the pressure of corporate success, warp his judgment. But that does not erase the boy who used to build wooden forts in my backyard. It doesn't erase the son you raised. People are more than their worst days, Anna. "And Patrick," Anna whispered, wiping her face, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. "Patrick died carrying all of it. He sat in that hospital bed, letting his body waste away, letting me think he was losing his mind, just so I wouldn't have to look at our son's memory and see a criminal. He broke his own heart to spare mine." "Patrick was a stubborn, prideful man," Daniel said, a sad smile touching his lips. "He thought he had to be the shield for everyone. He thought if he just took the blows in silence, you would be safe." Anna looked down at her hands, the anger entirely gone, replaced by a profound, aching understanding. "He should have trusted me to carry it with him. We built this life together. We should have carried the rot together." "He knows that now," Daniel said softly, looking out the window. "And he left you the map to fix it. He knew that when the dust settled, only you had the strength to clean up the wreckage." By the time the Lincoln pulled up to the brick row house, the winter sun was beginning to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the porch. Anna stepped out of the car. She felt lighter, hollowed out, but surprisingly steady. "Daniel," Anna said, leaning down to look at her old friend through the open car window. "I need you at the house tomorrow morning at 9. We have a foundation to dismantle." Daniel raised a thick white eyebrow. "Dismantle?" "Rebecca built a corporate empire on a foundation of sand and stolen money," Anna said, her voice finding its familiar steel. "It's time to tear down the glass boxes and return to the soil. We are going to restructure." Daniel nodded, a spark of genuine excitement returning to his tired eyes. "I'll bring the good coffee. Get some rest, Anna." When Anna walked into her home, she didn't turn on the overhead lights. She walked straight down the hallway and into Patrick's study. The scent of chicory and old paper welcomed her like an embrace. She walked over to the small crystal decanter on the bookshelf, poured a single finger of Kentucky bourbon, Patrick's favorite, and stood in front of his heavy leather reading chair. "You foolish, beautiful, stubborn old man," Anna whispered to the empty room. She took a slow sip of the bourbon, letting the heat burn down her throat. "You thought you were protecting me from the truth about Marcus. You thought you had to go to war with Rebecca in the dark. Anna traced the edge of the leather chair. I forgive you for lying to me. I forgive you for thinking I was too fragile to hold the weight of our son's sins. But don't you ever doubt me again, Patrick Sloane. Watch what I do with the ruins. She set the glass down, reached into her pocket, and pulled out the silver tie clip. She placed it carefully in the center of Patrick's desk. It was no longer a symbol of her erasure. It was a medal of honor. The restructuring of the Sloane Foundation was swift, ruthless, and entirely unorthodox. True to Anna's ultimatum, Rebecca Sloane vanished. Within 48 hours, she had resigned from all corporate boards, vacated her townhouse, and boarded a flight to Los Angeles. She left behind no forwarding address, only a signed severance agreement drafted by Daniel Cowan that stripped her of any claim to the Sloane name or assets. The following Monday, Anna convened a special session with the board of directors, but she didn't hold it in the 42nd floor glass box. She rented a folding table and set it up in the gymnasium of the West Philly Community Center, the exact spot where she and Patrick had signed their very first grant proposal 40 years ago. When the corporate executives arrived in their bespoke suits, looking entirely out of place under the buzzing fluorescent gym lights, Anna laid out the New World Order. The Sloane Foundation is no longer a venture capital firm masquerading as a charity, Anna announced, standing at the head of the plastic table. Effective immediately, we are liquidating the downtown corporate lease. We are selling the luxury company vehicles. We are dissolving the offshore holding accounts and bringing every single dollar back to Philadelphia. The chairman of the board looked nervous. Anna, the tax implications of liquidating those high-yield accounts. The implications are that we will pay our taxes like honest citizens, Anna cut him off sharply. Furthermore, a forensic audit has revealed a $2 million deficit created by the previous managing partner. Daniel Cowan and I have already legally liquidated the deed to my marital home, transferring its equity to plug the hole and balance the foundation's books. The debt is settled. The slate is clean. A murmur of shock went through the executives. Anna had voluntarily given up the equity of her own home, her safety net, to cover the crimes of her daughter-in-law and protect the foundation from federal scrutiny. It was an act of financial martyrdom they simply could not compute. And now, Anna said, placing her hands flat on the table, if any of you believe that community philanthropy requires 40-story views and million-dollar consulting fees, there is the door. I suggest you walk through it. But if you want to do the actual work of feeding the hungry, educating the youth, and keeping the marginalized from falling through the cracks, you roll up your sleeves and you sit back down. Half the board resigned by the end of the week. Anna didn't care. She replaced them with local educators, civil rights advocates, and community leaders. Her first official hire as the reinstated executive director was a young woman who had recently been fired from Arthur Sterling's law firm. When Ava Kendall walked into Anna's newly modest office, a converted classroom in the community center, she looked terrified. But Anna simply pointed to the chair across from her desk. Your affidavit saved this foundation, Ava, Anna said, handing the young woman a thick folder. Inside is a contract, Director of Community Outreach. It comes with a salary that actually pays the rent, and a premium healthcare plan that will cover every single cent of Maya's leukemia treatments until she is in remission. Ava stared at the contract, her hands trembling so badly she couldn't open it. She looked up at Anna, tears spilling freely. Why? After what I did? Why are you saving me? Because you did what you had to do for your child in a world that gave you no choices, Anna said softly. My job is to make sure the next generation of mothers in this city actually has a choice. Now sign the paper, Ava. We have work to do. 1 year later, spring arrived in Philadelphia, not with a whisper, but with a vibrant, unapologetic shout. The gray slush of winter had melted away, replaced by the brilliant green of new leaves and the smell of damp, rich earth. Anna Sloane knelt in the soil of the community garden located just behind the foundation's new headquarters. She wore a pair of worn denim overalls over a white blouse, a wide-brimmed straw hat shielding her face from the midday sun. Her hands, devoid of the immaculate manicures she used to wear for corporate galas, were buried deep in the dirt, packing soil around the base of a newly planted hydrangea bush. Patrick's hydrangeas. The messy, beautiful ones. She patted the earth down firmly, her joints aching a little more than they used to, but it was a good ache. It was the physical manifestation of a day spent entirely on her own terms. Ma'ana! Anna turned at the sound of the voice. Jogging down the gravel path toward her was a 7-year-old girl in a bright yellow sundress. She was thin, and her hair was cropped close to her scalp, slowly growing back in soft, dark curls. "Slow down, Maya, you're going to scuff those new sneakers," Ava called out, walking quickly behind her daughter. Ava looked transformed. The haunted, exhausted ghost from the diner was gone, replaced by a radiant, confident woman holding a clipboard filled with grant proposals. Maya practically tackled Anna in a hug. Anna laughed, a deep, joyful sound that echoed across the garden, catching the little girl and ignoring the dirt smudging the yellow dress. "Look," Maya held up a piece of thick cardstock. "My doctor gave it to me this morning. I get to ring the bell next week." Anna's breath caught in her throat. She looked up at Ava, who was grinning through tears of absolute joy. Remission. The word hung in the air, sweeter than any financial dividend ever could be. "Oh, sweetheart," Anna whispered, pressing a kiss to Maya's forehead. "That is the best news I've heard all year. We are going to have a party. A big one." "Ava," Anna said, standing up and brushing the dirt from her knees, "how are the numbers looking for the summer literacy program?" "Fully funded," Ava said proudly, tapping her clipboard. "Daniel finalized the legal structure for the new endowments yesterday. We're actually operating at a 15% surplus compared to last year. Without the corporate overhead, the money is actually reaching the kids." "Good," Anna smiled. "Keep it there. Patrick always said money is like water. If you hoard it in a tank, it goes stagnant. You have to let it flow to the roots." Ava nodded, her eyes lingering on Anna with deep, unspoken gratitude. "I'll let you finish up here. I need to get Maya back to school. I'll see you at the board meeting at 3? "I'll be there," Anna promised. She watched Ava and Maya walk back down the gravel path, the sound of the little girl's laughter drifting on the warm spring breeze. Anna took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. She walked over to the wooden bench at the edge of the garden and picked up her tailored blazer. Before slipping it on, her fingers brushed against the lapel. Pinned to the fabric was the scratched silver tie clip. It was empty now. The micro SD card had been destroyed, its secrets buried forever to protect the memory of a son who had lost his way and a husband who had tried to carry the world. Anna smoothed her thumb over the silver metal. She thought of the boardroom a year ago. She thought of the cold, suffocating silence of being erased. She had learned a profound truth in the last 12 months. Legacy is not a document filed in a downtown skyscraper. Legacy is not a name carved into the side of a marble building, and it certainly isn't a bank account. Legacy is the people who are left standing when the storm passes. It is the soil you cultivate, the seeds you protect, and the shade you provide for those who come after you. Anna slipped the blazer on, adjusting the collar. She picked up her gardening gloves, turned her face toward the sun for one long, peaceful moment, and began the walk back to the community center. She was Anna Sloan. She was a mother, a widow, and a founder. She had been tested by fire, betrayed by blood, and dismissed by power. But she had not surrendered. She had rooted herself deep into the earth, and from the ruins, she had grown something magnificent. And she was, finally, exactly where she was meant to be.